Hello and welcome to Türkiye Talks. As usual, we are going to talk about recent developments, and this week, Turkey, Russia, and Iran Iranian leaders came together in Tehran. We are going to discuss this summit together with Hakkı Uygur from Istanbul, and also Kadir Üstün from Washington, and myself, Bora Bayraktar. Welcome to the show. Let's start with the Tehran summit's meaning, if you will, because I think it was the first time the Russian president made a foreign visit. He went to another country since the war in Ukraine started. So, and also Turkey is about to launch an operation. There is a strong expectations that Turkey will strike against YPG and PKK terror group in Syria. What is the meaning of this summit under this circumstance? It was part of Astana talks, but there were bilateral meetings between Turkey, Iran, and Iran-Russia. Hakkı, maybe you can start with explaining the meaning of this summit.
Thank you, Bora. Yes, as you mentioned, it was an important meeting. And it was two parts actually. One part was bilateral meeting between Turkey and Iran, and one of them is trilateral meeting between Russia, Turkey, and Iran. Actually, bilateral meeting was supposed to, held before, much before than this, but it was postponed due to some reasons. There are some, of course, rumors why President Erdogan delayed his visit, but we know it was just happened after Saudi Arabia and Israeli visits to Ankara, and I think it sends some sort of message to Tehran that Ankara is not very happy with some of Iranian policies. And again, if you remember, when Mr. Emir Abdullahian wanted to come to Ankara last week, again, Turkish authorities didn't accept him in the first place. After a couple of weeks, he could just come to Turkey. Again, it was the most important reason for that was the assassination attempt to Israeli citizens inside Turkey. Turkey, although warned Iranian officials several times to, keep their fight against Israel out of Turkey, but unfortunately, Iranians insisted to have some kind of these attacks, and Turkey was very upset at that time. I remember. I talked with some Turkish officials in Ankara, and they talked this very, openly to me. So I think the timing was important, and Iranians got the message. And the second issue, if you look at the trilateral meeting, we didn't see anything new. All these three countries repeated their position regarding Syria and Turkish possible military operation. President Erdogan was very clear. He again said that we are ready and we are expecting that Russia and Iran, our partners in Astana process, have to, help us and to conduct such a military operation. But on the other hand, at least from Iranian side, we didn't see any positive sign. On the contrary, Mr. Khamenei's office published a statement that saying that any military operation will not help Turkey. It will harm Turkish interest, and terror groups also will have benefit from this kind of operation. And Turkey has to show some kind of respect to Syrian borders as Iran show, Turkish borders. It was quite interesting for me, this comparison, between two countries. And again, another important thing, at least for me, mentioning the Karabakh issue. Mr. Khamenei, once again, after maybe 2 years, while Karabakh war is over, he mentioned Karabakh, and he said that we will not allow the efforts to close our border with Armenia. It's a border for thousands of years. Actually, nobody threatened to close Iranian borders with Armenia, but it was interesting that still in Iran, some people, some officials think that Turkey or Azerbaijan altogether They want to close Iranian borders with Armenia. So it was these two things from Khamenei's statement was very important for me. And other issue regarding the summit, I underlined 2 points from President Erdogan. He said that although we had lots of meetings in Astana process until now, but we didn't have any progress when it comes to constitutional committee in Geneva. And also we had some promises from Iran and Russia to help us to clean this border from terror group, but unfortunately we didn't see any progress. So I think he wanted to show some kind of dissatisfaction from Russia and Iran, and actually warned them, if we don't see any progress in these issues, so why we are coming together always and talking and issue some statement, and they are like copy of each other. If you compare the seventh of statement with the previous ones, always almost there is no difference between them. So I think Turkey, so some of our friends asking me, because as yesterday and today we were very busy with some of TV shows in Turkey and try to explain the summit and meetings, asked me, so why Mr. Erdogan went to Iran and gave such kind of picture with Putin. On the one side is under pressure of Western powers, especially United States, and Mr. Raisi. So the answer is very clear, because these are two important players in the region, and you cannot basically ignore them when it comes to regional policies, energy issues, transportation. And this meeting to Iran, supposed to be before. I mean, now more than 1 year they are waiting, and Iranian officials and embassy always insisting that why you are delaying this meeting, why Mr. Erdogan doesn't come to Iran. So I think it was some kind of duty for one-day visit, and Mr. Erdogan showed that yes, Iran and Russia are neighbors, and we are able to talk them in any issue. But when it comes to concrete results, unfortunately, we didn't see anything new. And in the future, if Turkey start to have some kind of military operation, I think we will see again same positions from Iran and Russia. I mean, they will oppose it, they will reject it, and they will start a media campaign, accuse Turkey. But in practice, I don't think we will see any harsh response from Iranian militias or Russia in terms of military, counter-attack or something like that. I think I can stop here if you have any comment or question.
Yeah, I've been following Turkey's regional politics, Iran and other countries for the last 25 years, since mid-1990s. And sometimes it's difficult to match what Iran says and what Iran does. So when it comes to your statement, I mean, you said they are concerned about Turkey's operations in Syria. When I look at the map, I don't see any border with Iran and Syria, but they are very active. And also, when it comes to Turkey's security concerns, we haven't seen much from Iranian side to support Turkey's security, especially when it comes to PKK and their affiliated organizations in Iran. So these are questions in my mind. Kadir, you also followed Iran and its policy, their activities in the Middle East as an expert living in the US and following US-Iranian relations, Israeli-Iranian relations. What is your take on this meeting? What was the message behind it from Turkish, Iranian, and Russian points of view?
Thank you, Bora. Hakkı already outlined very nicely the general picture of what happened, and there were tensions, as he mentioned, between Iran and Turkey after Russia's involvement, military operation in Ukraine, the invasion in Ukraine. There was a period where everybody thought maybe Russia was going to reduce its foothold in Syria, and it was going to be a bit less interested in what happens in Syria, and to some extent it has happened, but of course that vacuum was going to be filled by Iran. And that's been a dynamic. Iran has been on the ground, and Turkey has been uncomfortable with some pro-Iran militias in certain regions in the past. There were tensions about, and with the reduced footprint of the Russians, we could have had another round of Turkish-Iranian tensions increasing in northern Syria, perhaps. It hasn't quite happened that way, but we can see from the statements that Hakkı mentioned, there are tensions about this. And I don't recall Iran kind of openly, saying to Turkey that you shouldn't get involved in northern Syria, you shouldn't do a military operation. Hakkı, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I don't think that kind of statement happened in the past, but I could be wrong. You follow Iran more closely. So that was interesting. And when you look at the statements, of course, these meetings, like Hakkı said, Turkey, Turkish leader, President Erdogan going to Tehran is important for Iranians, I guess, because it's been a while, and for Turkey, it's important to show that, it's not ignoring Russia and Iran, and it is recognizing that these are actors in northern Syria that can cause trouble for Turkey. But at the same time, when we look at the statements, we don't really see much, let's say, confluence of opinions. They're not really on the same page. They're emphasizing different things. Turkey's priority is very clear. It's been consistent about YPG activities in northern Syria. It has, Turkey constantly talks to the US about this, Russia about this, as well as Iran. So its priority is clear, but the emphasis from Iran and Russia vary from time to time. And of course, Turkey has been uncomfortable by some of the Iranian activities inside Turkey. That is, they feel like they're in a all-out war with Israel for a very long time, and Turkey obviously doesn't want its land to be a kind of ground for this kind of regional fight between Israel and Iran. That's a major concern. And there was also several weeks ago, I believe, at the UN Security Council, there was the question about authorization of humanitarian help into Syria going through Turkey's border. And there were questions whether Russia would veto that. Russia reluctantly allowed that authorization to be renewed for another 6 months. So I think these leaders needed to kind of check in and to see where they're at regarding northern Syria. But as Hakkı said, there's not much accomplished. There's nothing really new, especially towards a political solution. And it was, of course, interesting. President Erdogan once again talked about the US support for YPG on his return to Turkey as well. So this issue will not go away. Regarding the relations with US, he also mentioned the F-16s, because I think the journalists asked him about that, because recently Congress put some additional sort of obstacles before the F-16 sale to Turkey. We don't have to get into that today, perhaps in detail, but the point is, Turkey last week it was trying to negotiate, grain issue between Ukraine and Russia, and this week talking about northern Syria with Iran and Russia. And a couple weeks ago it was in the NATO summit, deciding the future of NATO. So it also, once again, I think underlines the fact that Turkey will need to continue to maintain these relations with the West, and as well as these actors in the Middle East, including Russia and Iran. So that dynamic needs to be understood by the West, because we're already seeing commentary about, Turkey becoming close to Iran and Russia, etc. So I think, like Hakkı said, not a lot came out in the way of solutions, and some of the tensions, I think, were once again underlined between these countries, but they're going to have to sort of live with that for the time being.
How much do you think the Iranians are committed, Hakkı, to this Astana process? I mean, all the three actors. For Turkey, what is at stake is clear. As Kadir mentioned, not only in Tehran, but also in a NATO summit, Turkey's stand was clear, and Turkey's concern is its security and war against terror, especially arising from Syria and Iraq. From Russian point of view, we know that they want to be in the Middle East, so Syria is an important base for Russians, so they want to stay there. We understand why they are committed. But what are the reasons of Iranians to be in that table? How much they are committed to this, let me say, fragile cooperation among these three countries?
For a long time, they see Syrian crisis as a, solved problem from their perspective. I mean, the war is over, regime is, had a victory, so there is no need to have a meaningful negotiation with opposition groups or Turkey. So they show that, but, maybe because of Russian factor, because Russia has lots of issues with Turkey, as Kadir mentioned, from grain issue, the economic issue, airspace, etc. There are lots of cooperation, especially after Ukraine issue, but also before that. So, and even I remember sometimes Iranian officials, blame Turkey and Russia to have mutual cooperation and ignoring Iran, even in Astana. They talked this several times. So the main actors from the first day was Russia and Turkey. We remember the evacuation of Aleppo that time. Since then, it's the same. But unfortunately, from Ukraine, crisis and invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the relation between Russia and Iran also is changing in terms of, more Iranian effect on Russia. Recently, probably you also saw the news that Iran tries to sell some drones, armed drones to Russia. It shows that this military cooperation between Russia and Iran will increase, and it will not be good news for Turkey, because this military, dimension will widen between two countries. It will affect Syria. And I'm sure we can find some common ground with Russia, but when it comes to Iran, as you also mentioned, is very right. I sometimes give example for our Iranian friends. Look, you didn't, tolerate Mujahideen Khalq organization in Baghdad while they were, disarmed. They didn't have any arm. They didn't any presence in your border, just in Baghdad, and you bombed them. And finally you forced them to go out from Iraq, and now they have their camp in Albania. Why you don't understand Turkish, security threats, security issues? But unfortunately, they have maximalist policies. They see Syria as a, victory field, and they don't want to have a negotiation with Turkey. Even Karabakh issue, as I mentioned, the war is over, but they have still their agenda, and they try to push Turkey and Azerbaijan in any, opportunity. I think from one, perspective, they think that, of course, they are right. They didn't gain anything in Syria by negotiations or by diplomacy. whatever they have, they gain by force, and they use their, force, militias. We remember Qasem Soleimani, Fatimiyan, Hezbollah, all other, militia groups came to Syria, and finally they got all this they have. So if Turkey, really start this operation, and if Iran sees Turkish seriousness, I think their behavior will change, because always we know it's not just about military operation or policy. Even in ordinary life, daily life, most of their logic of behave, it depends on force. I mean, if they see this force, really Turkey will use this military option, I think they will accept. But otherwise, I think we will have no result with this negotiation. As President Erdogan, mentioned, for the several years we are sitting here, and you told us we will help you to clean this border, but you didn't, and we want our refugees go back voluntarily, safe and honorable way. But for the Iran, it's nothing. I mean, Iran don't have any, refugee issue with Syrians. Why they have to, care about Turkish problem? And again, remember, we have lots of issues. It's not just about here. Even in Gulf, recent Turkish-Israeli rapprochement, they don't like it. And if you look at the Khamenei statement, he told that Israel is the enemy of Islamic, Ummah. Palestinian issue, must be, continue, etc. So from Karabakh, Israeli issue, Turkish-Saudi rapprochement, all these things, they see Turkey as a rival, as a big rival, and it's nothing new. I mean, it's nothing something, is Islamic Republic. Even in Shah Mohammed Reza period, it was the same. So they see zero-sum game, Syria. If Turkey wants to get something, Iran has to give something. So basically they don't want, and they have Russia. And of course, the biggest problem we don't talk about, the biggest problem, the lack of, presence of United States in Syria anymore, except this YPG area, they have under their control. So I think we will see this crisis, going on for a while, but any military operation will help Turkey a lot, because if you look at this map, it's not natural map. It's not demonstrating, demography. It's not demonstrating regional power balance. Nothing. Very, small area under the influence of Turkey. Big part for, Kurdish people, and other one, the Baas regime. So I think at the end of the day, Turkish authorities know that, but it's a matter of time. And as Mr. Erdogan said, we are having our, preparedness. And when we're ready, we will start this military operation.
This summit has, in the last 5-6 years, have been regarded as not maybe a challenge, but a balance against the West, especially in the Middle East. Kadir, I want to bring in the Biden visit to the Middle East. He traveled to Israel, Palestinian territories, then he went to Saudi Arabia, and there was a security and development summit in Jeddah, in which, it was attended by Gulf countries, Jordan, and some others. So it was in a bit, it reminded us Trump's Middle East policy, bringing Israeli and Gulf leaders together, and creating an axis against Iran, probably. Do you think this Tehran and Biden's Jeddah summit has anything to do with being a counter argument to each other, or we should separate those two, and but in a way think it's kind of bringing us to a few years ago's Middle East?
Well, you're right. There are some continuations between Trump and Biden. The Abraham Accords is presented, discussed in the U.S. as a win for U.S. policy, not just for Israel. So the normalization between Israel and other Arab countries is something that is celebrated. And Biden administration has no sort of plan for peace process between Palestine and Israel that's practically not really feasible. So he went to Palestinian Authority territory, Palestinian territory, but only thing he concretely offered is financial support, and he did kind of gave a lip service to peace process, but he absolutely is not going to invest any political capital on that front. The bigger story was, of course, Saudi Arabia. The travel to Israel made sort of diluted the reaction against Biden's visit to Saudi Arabia, because because of the Ukraine situation, the gas prices are really high in the international markets. It's been pushing inflation in the US. It's a much more urgent matter that oil markets calm down and the price goes down. That directly impacts the American consumer, and there is elections in November. So there are not a lot of tools in the hands of the administration to bring down the price of oil. And this is one of the things it could do, try to convince OPEC to increase its production. But at the same time, Russia has influence over OPEC for the last several years. It's been called now OPEC Plus, right? So regional countries like Saudi Arabia is not rushing to increase production all that much to not to upset perhaps Russia partly, and it also helps their budget in the meantime. But the Biden administration didn't have a lot of choices because of the Khashoggi matter. They were under really serious pressure domestically, but Biden made that trip and added Israel and Palestine to make it look like it wasn't just a trip to go see MBS. What's that?
Yeah, right.
It was so that he didn't want the optics of meeting Mohammed bin Salman only to help with the energy market situation. So at the end of the day, that was the big prize. But we haven't seen really major announcements by Saudi Arabia. We don't know how much it helped. It helped kind of because Biden made some really big statements in the past. He said he was going to treat Saudi Arabia like a pariah. CIA, says and probably ordered the killing of Khashoggi. So it didn't look like he would ever meet MBS. Long story short, this trip was largely to sort of reassure Israel and Saudis that US didn't forget about this region, and because of the US policy to focus on China, right, and confront Russia at the same time, Middle East remains very important. These allies remain important for the balance of power globally, and there is a constant realization of that. So if you want to confront China, it's not going to be only in the Asia Pacific region, or you can't do that with through working with India, Japan, Australia only. So you can't just give up on the Middle East. And of course, the nuclear deal with Iran, that's not going anywhere. And Israel is starting to talk tougher and tougher, and they tried to get Biden to commit to a military option, right? Biden avoided doing that. But the long story short, the Middle East trip for Biden was out of a necessity, and it hasn't achieved a whole lot, but it showed once again that Biden will be kind of a will like a conservative U.S. policy in many ways, and continuing some of the quote-unquote accomplishments of the Trump administration. It's not going to change the Middle East dynamics all that much, but it gives Saudis and Israelis the confidence that, you know, Biden is ready to listen to them if it comes down to, especially if it comes to, when it comes to confrontation with Iran, perhaps.
Well, we are coming to the end of the show, but I want to talk a little bit more about President Erdogan's statements during this summit. You know, in the presence of Putin and Raisi, he made a very clear statement, as Hakkı, you have mentioned, about Turkey's fight against terrorism, and especially he mentioned Tel Rifat and Münbic areas, you know, to be cleared from PKK and YPG and other terrorist groups. So, do you think if Turkey launches this operation, because Turkey is very determined, do you think Turkey will see pro-Iranian militias as Turkish forces had met during previous operations, or do you think Turkey will only face terror groups? What is your opinion about that? After all, you know, they said they will support a war against terror.
Yes, but the problem is in rhetoric, as you mentioned at the beginning. You know, Iran always supporting Turkey against, you know, terror. But when it comes to definition, what is terror or who is terror organization? You know, the answers of three countries are much different. And even Mr. Khamenei said that when he came out after, you know, meeting with Mr. Erdogan. He said that there is not just one single, you know, terror organization. So he means that their terror organization are different, maybe National Syrian Army. So I think they will not support our fight against terror in any way. And yes, you are right. The militia groups will come to front and they will try to stop Turkish army. But we saw in before also, I mean, their capacity is very limited comparing to Turkish army. You know, they will try to do something, but when they see Turkish operation, I think they will step back and they cannot afford to stop Turkey. And I wrote an article and I mentioned that Nubul and Zahra, especially very sensitive areas for Iran, the Shia neighborhoods around Aleppo, Turkish army will not target that area, but if they counterattack from that locations, Turkish army will respond them. So it depends on them. If they really want to Turkish operation stay in limited areas, they don't have to, you know, they shouldn't come close to Turkish forces. But otherwise, when Turkish army started this kind of operation, we saw that, yes, it sometimes takes time, but at the end of the day, all we know the result of military operation. We saw in Afrin, remember in Afrin, a lot of, you know, articles, a lot of opinions, Turkish army cannot go inside, I don't know, whatever. But at the end of the day, it was a basic operation in terms of military technical terms. So I think, again, to returning your question, militia groups will try to stop Turkey. They will come. Even in Iraq, I expect some more attacks to Turkish targets, like Bashika basement or etc. But at the end of the day, as always I say, you know, Iran knows Turkey's importance and Turkish army's, you know, position. And if Turkish army really wants to do something, there is no, even all, you know, Russian presence or Iranian presence in Syria, I mean, militarily, you cannot compare with Turkish army, you know, they are just some symbolic presence. Mostly they are militias, and militias don't have, you know, heavy equipment. Just RPGs, you know, anti-tank, some systems, or, you know, these light weapons. But when Turkish army, you know, enter the area, so as I said, you know, the result is very good. But on the other hand, again, we need to be careful about the, you know, Western powers, especially United States, and their reactions. Because as we know, yes, United States doesn't want to involve too much, but when it comes to Turkey, they are always, they have concern. We have concern, So the problem is Turkey doesn't want to stay between, United States and Russia, because if you lose both sides, it will be some difficult times for Turkey. Maybe that's why last point, Mr. Erdogan mentioned about the defense industry cooperation with Iran in Tehran. He said, for me, it's a very important issue. All we surprised because we didn't hear before such a statement from Turkish authorities. We know it's a very sensitive issue. We know Turkish companies already have some troubles with Western, Western factories. Sometimes we have some sanctions against our, stuff. But maybe he just wants to show to the United States, look, we need these F-16s, for example, but you still don't want to give us, but we have other, options, and we can have cooperation with Iran, even maybe with Russia. So again, a lot of balances, Turkey tries to keep all these, angles, and, after all, maybe the military operation will start and we will see what will happen.
Bora, I want to ask you something. You mentioned earlier this was actually Putin's first trip abroad since the invasion of Ukraine, and of course going to Iran is not really, it shows the degree to which Putin's relationship with Europe, the West, really has collapsed, and I don't think it's going to be repaired anytime soon. At the same time, Turkey keeps its relationship with Russia and tries to broker deals between Ukraine and Russia, both in the way of sort of achieving some sort of ceasefire, but also grain exports. And again, progress is very slow, and Putin was saying that, only if the Europeans lift embargoes on Russia, that he would let the Ukrainian grain out of the Ukrainian ports. So he's driving a hard bargain. But at the same time, optics are important in diplomacy, and we saw that clip a lot of journalists made, noted that, this time around, Putin waited almost a minute to meet Erdogan. When it comes to optics of sort of power balance, right, between Turkey and Russia, yes, Russia can create a lot of problems for Turkey throughout the region. It has an interest in talking to Turkey, but at the same time, Russia is in a difficult situation diplomatically. How is that seen in Turkey, within the Turkish media? How do you think Turkish public opinion looks at the situation and sees this relationship with Russia, especially? Do they feel a bit more self-confident after isolation of Putin? How is it seen out there?
Well, that kind of scenes, the diplomatic gestures, as you said, the movements, shaking hands, that kind of stuff has always been used by many, in media, political parties for domestic consumption, especially in Turkey, the society is polarized, and also we see a very harsh opposition against the government and against the president himself. So whatever happens, good or bad, people can focus and talk about that kind of stuff. And it was a big issue when President Erdogan visited Russia, and he was in a similar situation when he was going to meet with Putin. So in Turkey, it was regarded as, by most people, now Turkey scored and it's even. But I don't know if President or Turkish diplomats did it on purpose or not. But it is clear that also in international media, Putin's wait for a minute, and he was not very happy, obviously. And international media also interpreted this scene as, Putin is losing credibility. But from my point of view, much more important than this scene was Erdogan's speech in the presence of Putin and Raisi. As we have discussed a little earlier, he openly stated that Turkey is ready to launch a strike against PKK and YPG, and Turkey is determined. So what he has said, I think, is much more important. But as you said, when it comes to photos and magazine side of it, people talk a little bit more about that. But at the same time, I think for Putin, I saw a tweet, he was cured by his own medicine kind of thing. It's very important for Russian diplomats to understand that kind of gestures is not fair in most cases. We remember how Putin met with French President Emmanuel Macron. So you can give messages, you can give photos to, put your counterpart into difficult position, but it can happen to you at any time. So this was, I think, this is regarded as a medicine of himself. So I don't know, do you agree with that or not?
Yeah, it was, Turkish president had gone to Moscow, and I think Putin kept him waiting for several minutes. And, domestically, that doesn't look good. Like you said, the opposition could take advantage of that. And these things are important. But what they signify is the fact that, Putin is in a tougher situation, and, he's not traveling to European capitals. He's not able to, and in the foreseeable future, that probably won't happen unless there's some progress on the Ukrainian front. But he's doubling down. He's actually already threatened to enlarge the war and go after some other cities in Ukraine. This will be a long fight, and he's finding few friends that would matter strategically, to be honest, because Iranian, he's being excluded from high technology areas, and Iranian drones, I don't know how effective they'll be. Turkish drones have been very effective in Ukraine. So he's in a tough situation in terms of symbolizing that. I think it had some importance, but otherwise, like you said, it's just optics and how things look. That's not that important strategically, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay. This is the end of our show. Hakkı Uygur from Iran. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Kadir. Thank you. So hope to see you next time. And have a nice week.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Bora.